Hello, and welcome back to the sim. In this one, we're here on the ground in Mackinac Island with the ATR. And we're in the Highland series because, well, we're picking up our rich bosses. We're going to go ahead, jump in the plane, shoot up to Sault Ste. Marie. But first, we're going to go through the new Bravo config we've set up for the ATR. Let's go ahead, jump in. We want to set up our Bravo so we can control the throttle quadrant. With the Bravo, I've gone ahead and set up the 6 axes in a configuration that I thought kind of worked best for this plane. So first, on the left-hand side, I went ahead and I mapped this to the parking brake lever because I felt, well, that seems to be right where it physically was. Then we also went ahead and we mapped throttle 1 to the 2nd axis. But what you're going to see is the 3rd axis, instead of putting the other throttle there, we went ahead and we put the Gust guard so we could do the throttle lock in between the 2 throttles. And then I went and over here on the 4th axis, I put throttle number 2. Then we use the next 2 for our condition levers, so we can set those up to control the condition lever. And since we're out of an axis, I went ahead and kept the flaps on the flap button. Now, yes, you will find that we can go into reverse. So we do have the reverse fully functioning. We can get ourselves back out of reverse. And we even added, using a switch, to go ahead and get our ground idle and flight idle guard. So now we can go ahead, we can remove the guard, and now we can go all the way down to ground idle. So coming into SPAD.neXt, you'll see that we are on the current version of 0.9.14.2. This did come out in October of 2023. This is an advanced tutorial in that we're targeting a plane like the ATR, which uses a lot of LVARs. There are other videos on how to set these things up. I suggest you go to the video guides where you're going to find the Getting Started series. Especially important is installing the LVAR bridge. You got to make sure that you did install that. It was explained in the first video, but there is a dedicated video to it because you can install updates and install it separately. You will need the LVAR bridge to make the ATR work. There are also some other ATR videos, including the Thrustmaster throttle that I used most of the time, and this is where this kind of video has come out of, is because that had on-axis range for reversers, whereas here we're trying to override it. And so with the updates, things have changed. But as you can see, there is a ton of videos and tutorials. Keep in mind, just because something is not the exact same device or the exact same plane, you can learn from those how to apply it to other planes, whether it be learning the trick and then applying it to another plane, or the device but applied to a different plane. So when we head to our control section, we've got our Bravo, as we've highlighted before. There is a throttle quadrant section, the autopilot and switches section, and the Annunciator section. So click on the button, head on over to Online Snippets. It's going to open up. You want to select the complete device. Now you could check only for current aircraft, but keep in mind that will be anything that's for this Highline livery of the ATR, or you can uncheck that and you could just type in ATR. If you look for my name, 9603, you're going to find the Microsoft Flight Sim ATR 600 by me. Go ahead and click OK. It's going to ask you if you want to replace all devices. You're going to replace all definitions. Yes will replace everything. No will merge it, so you'll go through and delete things you don't want that you previously assigned, or cancel will do nothing. So like I said, if I hit yes, it's going to replace everything with what was in the setup. So button number 9, this is the M-Star engine go around 1 button. So if you remember, there is a little button over here on the side, the Lego block. This is programming mode. And what's great is at any time, if I press a button, the UI will jump to where that button or switch is. So same thing, if I was to press the go around button right now, you'll see that it jumps to button number 9. Now, button number 9, ironically, is actually shared also with the first lever. So those two buttons for the go-around is actually shared in the same spot, but now you know where that is. So on this handle, we've got our go-around button, and for that, we needed the LVAR. So again, this isn't using the regular go-around. So here, we took the LVAR of the MS, so Microsoft ATR, engine go-around 1. So that's the go-around for throttle control 1. We've set that to a value of 1. So every time I press it after that, it is going to initiate go-around mode. There's nothing on button 10, 11, 12. Button number 22 is the trim wheel. So we've got our trim wheel going forward. So we've gone and set elevator trim position, and we are moving that by 0.5. And then we have the increment of the elevator trim position, so nose up on 23. 24 is going to be the first axis detent. So here you can see on the first axis, when I move it down, that button turns on. Button number 25 goes on. And so with button pressed, which is the equivalent of a switch on event, so it will button press, send the event, and then when released, send the event. This is not going to repeat events. That is the button held function. So don't worry, you don't have to change this into a switch mode. Switches and button press equal the same thing. Here is where we found the unique configuration item that we need to set the LVAR for the lever position to 0. And this is how we can force it all the way to the bottom into the go around position. 26, the bottom of the axis that we're using for our gust lock, for our throttle lock. 27, that would be the button at the bottom of engine number 2. So all we did there was we copy and pasted into 27, and then we came in and we changed the value from number 1 to number 2, and we kept the same thing of setting the value with the static value. 28 is our condition lever for engine 1 is set up so that we can control the condition lever when it goes into the detent. So at the bottom will be in low, and if we push it down, that will put it into cutoff and shut off the engine. So hopefully we move fast enough that we didn't interrupt the engine for too long. And then when the button is released, so when we come out of that position, it is going to put it into the low or the feathered position. 29 is blank, 30 is blank, 33, that is the condition position 2. So that is the bottom of our last lever and getting it into the cutoff position. So then we come over to our axes, which I have already named. So with the parking brake, to make things work the way we did, so if you recall, when we look at it in the plane, we have our multiple positions. And so to make that work, when we open up, you're going to notice that on that axis, we actually have 3 different axis definitions. So again, that's all done by going to the add event and selecting the axis value changed. When we look at the first one, we had to add an action, and we chose a custom axis event. And the reason for this is we needed to open up the dialog so that we could set it all up. The first part is our range definition. So we have it that when we move from here to here roughly, only one time while it's in this range, will it send a value of 2 to the LVAR for the parking emergency brake. So this lever doesn't function as an axis. Instead, it has 3 values, 0, 1, and 2. And so now what we're doing is we're mapping a range with 1 time so it doesn't spam 2 during the whole time it's moved within this range of value. And it was as simple as saying, okay, we're here at the bottom. I'm going to set it. And then I moved it up a little bit and said, well, whatever, somewhere in there, that's good enough. We then found our LVAR. So I just searched for EMER because I saw in the plane EMER listed here. And based on the way everything works in this plane, yes, I can use the data monitor. That also works really easy. Add all the LVARs, move that lever a whole bunch of times, and then sort for it. But this was real easy because I typed in EMER, and then I went to data definitions, and I went to LVAR, and it kind of dropped it down to only a few things. And it was real quick for me to find the park emergency brake. Well, there you go. Parking brake with emergency lever. That's the one that we wanted. So then, like I said, we're going to set it to a value of 2. And that was because we are using no actual access value. We're using the range to trigger it to send to. And I did invert the axis because by default they're backwards. So I could have set this to not inverted, and then those values are just reversed. So I hit Control C, Control V, I pasted, then I opened the second one, and I moved further up, and I hit the set, somewhere in the middle, I hit the set again, and then kept it one time, changed the value to 1. Then we copy pasted for the last one to get it all the way up to the top. So that handled the emergency lever / parking brake for us. And now it's physically in the same place on our Bravo that we see inside of the sim. Throttle number 1, and this is where things get a little tricky. It's different when you have something with a throttle axis, and it's changed since they had done the update to the ATR. Earlier on with the ATR, you could do this normally and then just hit send throttle decrease. However, they changed how they interpret the values, and unlike the CRJ, they don't have a setting for you to set a value range, but we just had to play with it a little bit, and it was like, oh yeah, okay, I see what they changed. So here we set up a custom axis. So we went to custom axis event. And again, this is using the extended throttles that Microsoft Flight Sim introduced. So if you go to the regular throttle, they won't really move. You got to go to the extended throttle axis. Now, the key here is even though we're just doing the throttle axis and there is no reverser, we still need to tell it we only want to go 0 to 16,383. In the EFB, we're going to have to tell it it has reverse axis. And in doing so, it's anticipating anything below idle is going to be the axis. So no problem. We'll just remap the standard value. So we won't do a range definition, and we'll just remap from 0 all the way up to 16,383. So from 0 here up to 1023 is going to remap to 0 to 16,383. As I said, the target value we wanted was throttle 1 axis set with the underscore EX1 added to it. We are going to use an axis value, but we're using the raw rescaled value on, and we are good to go. Then I copied, I pasted, and of course I just changed this one value and moved it to the throttle 2. So that one, again, it's going to be pretty straightforward. The key with these ones is once we've done this, you have to just roll with it, right? Expect that it may not work properly at first because we have to go into the EFB to configure it. And we'll do that in a moment once we've covered the other axis. We're choosing to set ourselves a custom axis that's going to drive a LVAR that's expecting like a 0 and a 1 or a 0, 1, 2, 3. And so here, again, same thing with the Gust lock. We set the upper range is going to set it to 0. And when it gets down to the bottom, we're going to go ahead and, again, only sending it one time, set it to a 1. So again, it's a switch, but it looks like an axis. So we might as well put it physically on the throttle quadrant where it goes. And with our condition levers, we did the exact same thing again, like we did with the parking brake, and we created 3 positions. So at the top, going from 14,781 to 16,383, we went ahead and set it to a value of 1. In the middle, it's a value of 2, and then towards the bottom, you've got that value of 3. So it's a 1, a 2, a 3, and then a 0 is the cutoff. And of course, we went and mapped the zeros down here. The only things that we have to calibrate are going to be throttle 1 and throttle 2. So here in the EFB, you want to head over to the options page, and you want to click on the triangle, and you want to go into the throttle setup. Now, this was the little piece that doesn't make sense, but it's how I kind of figured it out to work the way I like it working. You may be different, but this seems to work well. So yes, dual axis, because I have an axis for each throttle. Even though there isn't a reverser axis section, we've gone ahead and checked the box. But remember, that's because we've remapped our axis. If you didn't have the ability to remap an axis, this wouldn't work for you. So here, remember, we've got it that when this throttle is at the bottom, we're telling it, tell it it's 0, not minus 16,383. And so for idle, we still set it at 0. Then I moved it to a position that I like. I picked about here kind of thing, found where I wanted it, and then I hit set for my notch. And then I moved further up to where I wanted ramp to be. I hit set for ramp, and then all the way to the top. So I set up my ramps, I set up my notches, and I set up my idles. And you'll notice this is where it's different because of the remapping. You could also set up your tolerances so that you can make those notch areas larger if you want, so that it doesn't take as much to fiddle to get it in. Because on the PFD I've got it so that it'll show me that it's in the notch or it's in the ramp, I don't bother worrying about making them too big. So I set those up as 250, 500, and 150. I hit the validate, said everything was good. Now here's the key. You can't look at anything until you've done all this. So you're looking at the values here, right, in the EFB, and physically looking down here, if you look at my hand, on the throttle of this is roughly where I want to be. Then you're clicking on the set. At this point, you can't be looking at the throttle because the actual throttles could be doing all kinds of stuff, and it's completely wrong. Because until you exit and click OK, it doesn't actually take effect. So now that we've done that, it has taken effect. And as I mentioned, I usually check the box for the PFD throttle hint. The reason for the PFD throttle hint is when we come back over here, you're going to see on the PFD, as we move, it'll tell us we're in the manual range. And then when we get to the notches, it'll say notch, notch, manual mode, ramp, ramp, manual, right? So we can see that here on the PFD. So now we're done with the throttle quadrant portion. Let's go to the autopilot and switches. First up on the knob, something you're going to find is I have it programmed. So every time I turn the knob, it's going to use text-to-speech to tell me what I've got the switch set to. If you don't like that, come in on each setting and delete it so it doesn't say this. I've seen some people post, hey, where's this coming from? Well, you turn the knob and it says it. Check the knob. Now, for the buttons and the annunciators, we've mapped them to all of the LVARs because it is a full LVAR system. That's the way Hans likes to do his planes. And so this made it real easy. So short press is going to press the heading button. A long press is going to sync the heading. So I like to sync the heading bug. And then I've got it set up so it will be on when it's in heading select mode. It'll be off when neither heading or heading select is enabled. And when it's in heading hold mode, it's actually going to slow flash. So the ATR does have kind of two separate heading modes. And this is just a way for us to show both with indicators. And as you can see, it's flashing now because it's in heading hold, which you get when you enable toga mode. And if we click it for the short press, to toggle the mode, it goes into heading select mode, and that LED is going to be lit up. Press it, it goes now into heading hold mode, and we are going to get the slow flash every 2 seconds that I configured for it. Hit it again, solid. Nav mode is nav mode, and there's only the short press that is currently mapped. You may want to map something to the long press. Approach mode is mapped to approach mode, so it's identical to nav. I copied, I pasted, and then I found the status for approach mode. And we set that to 0 and 1 for turning on the lights. Instead of setting up the back course, because who really flies a back course, what's more important I find is to have VNAV, and I've done this on a lot of other planes, so I've kept it in the same place. People can move around if they like. So this will toggle the VNAV mode, and you'll get your status indication from VNAV. For altitude hold mode, we got the same thing, set altitude hold, and it's got the LED that will track for that mode. VS mode, same thing, VS mode, and then you've got IAS mode. So if I press it for a short time, that will turn on IAS mode, so basically flight level change. And if you hold the button for a long press for 1 second, this will toggle the speed target mode, meaning it'll go from FMS mode to manual mode. So that way you can hold this down, switch it into manual mode, and be able to manually dial in whatever speed you want to fly, as opposed to letting the MCP fly it. Coming over to the encoder for the clockwise turns and counterclockwise turns, we have to set up a condition. That condition is based on the switch. So the left side switch actually is pressing buttons. And so button 21 is altitude mode, and then at the bottom is button 17. So while it's button 21, we're going to be doing the altitude select data as well as moving the data. So this will get the clicking of the knob as well as changing the data. So you'll notice we have to do that for all these things that have encoders and turns. When we want to move them, we have to move basically what moves the animation, and we have to move the actual data itself. So we've set up for the pitch wheels, the headings, the course data, and then yes, for IAS speed, well, at the bottom we would be controlling the target delta. On the autopilot button, so for a short press, it'll turn on the autopilot, and for a long press, it'll turn on the yaw damper. And we're tracking the autopilot for the LED. On your gear lever, you've got your gear up and gear down. Then, of course, we've got the LED lights for the gear position. And then the only switch that I mapped, which you saw earlier, is this one right here. And that's for setting whether or not the idle gate is controlled. I've left all the other switches unbound. Feel free to come up with something for those. And of course, on your flaps, you got your flaps up, flaps down. And if you hold it for a long, it will send it all the way up or send it all the way down. And then finally, we've got the annunciator. So I've gone through and I have mapped up all of the annunciators. Master warning is tied to the master warning. Master caution, as you can see, is tied to the current master caution. Engine fire is tied to the engine fire handles because those lights turn on. So I found anything with LT is a light. So those are the really easy way to hook up anything that's going to blink and flash. Love that the ATR has all of those things with their own LVAR. Also makes the fact that I don't have to actually set this to flash because it's toggling that LVAR 1, 0, 1, 0. So it's doing the flash for me. We've gone and set up the vacuum. There isn't really a vacuum on a turboprop, so I left that over. Feel free to remap it if you want. We got our oil pressure. We got our hydraulic pressure, so we went ahead. We got all the M-Star pressure hydraulics, so we mapped those. We got our low fuel feeds. We got our aux pump set up. We got our anti-ice. I didn't set anything up for the anti-ice. You can feel free to go and map that. I just never got around to it, and I just noticed it now. Oops. Parking brake, set that up. Starter engaged, also didn't map that. There's a lot of things for the starter, and I just didn't bother with it. Map the volts. Map the APU to the prop brake. So if the prop brake is in the ready position, or we're using it, I've got that triggering. So if that light turns on, this will turn on, so we know we're in hotel mode. And then finally, I got all the doors set up, so any of the lights in the cockpit that will go off if a door is open will also set this off as well. Well, guys, just want to thank you so much for coming along on this one. If you liked it, please hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't, and come along with us on the next one. As always, thanks for watching. Have a great day.